Welcome. In this lecture, we're going to talk about what's known as the Euclidean or sometimes coordinate plane. And the notation for that is R2, where this is that blackboard R, right, which has two lines to kind of indicate we're talking about the real numbers. So we talked about the real numbers before and maybe this is kind of, so last time, right, we talked about the real numbers and the real number line. Right, and we denoted these, if you recall, we denoted these like this with the blackboard R and the real number line, which is just kind of how we write them on the line like that. But now this is kind of new, is that sometimes we're actually going to want to look at kind of two numbers at the same time, okay, with an order mattering in them. So sometimes we actually need to, so sometimes instead we need to consider two real numbers. So we consider two real numbers at the same time. And maybe even the relationship between them. So we might not just want to know what they are, but they're kind of the relationship between them. Maybe one's the input of a function, one's an output, or something like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll kind of show you what I mean by this. So this is the Euclidean, or called coordinate plane. So the Euclidean, also called coordinate plane. So that's what I'm going to be drawing here. It's good to label what you're drawing. So I'm going to kind of keep track of this with two different colors. So the first copy of the real line, we're going to need two copies of the real line. The first one is going to be like our x, or horizontal axis. Often it's our x-axis, so we will indeed call it the x-axis. And then we're going to want a second copy. And so the going right and left is going to have to do with our first copy of the real numbers, and then going up and down is going to have to do with our second copy of the real numbers. And usually this is the y-axis. It's like the vertical axis. And then we usually want to put some kind of scale on here. So we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And then, this is 0. This is actually kind of the point 0, 0. We go -1, -2, -3, -4, and so on in that direction. And then we want to also have a scale going this way. So that kind of tells us right and left again is the first coordinate, or the x coordinate. And then we go up. So we need a scale like that. Again, this is 0. It's actually the point 0, 0. Okay, and so on like this. So we go up and down. And then to give you an example of a point on here, so we'll go ahead and put a point on here. So I'm going to put the point pi1. So I want to go pi over, which is about 3.14, and then you can go on for a long time and have competitions in that, and some people find that really fun. And then we go up, and that's 1. So like this. And then, so the first coordinate, so I said I'm looking at the point pi1, right? And the first coordinate comes from how far to the right I went. And then the second coordinate comes from how far up I went. Because these are both positive numbers, it's to the right and up. If they were negative, it would be to the left and down. Okay, so what I've got here is that this one tells me that I went up 1 unit. So up 1 unit, which is why I put that there. And then this one over here told me that this is to the right pi units. Okay, and then let's look at I said that because these were positive numbers, we went to the right and up, but just to kind of contextualize that just a little bit better, now I want to do a point which is, I'm going to do my first coordinate coordinate is going to be minus 2e. Actually, that's somewhere kind of over here, so that tells me I go left that much. And then minus 5/2, which is down about that much. So I have here, right, the first coordinate is a negative, and it tells me that I went to the left. And it's okay that this is one of these really funny numbers. So I've taken 2 copies of the number e, which is this kind of really funny number. So this is to the left, 2e units. Right, because I have a minus sign. And then for the other one, I want to go, right, because it's going to be a minus 5/2. So good, it's a fraction. But because it's a minus, this tells me I go down 5/2 units. Okay, so I want to emphasize something here for you. So I hope this makes sense, right? When they're positive, it's the first coordinate. If it's positive, it tells me I go to the right that many units. If it's negative, it tells me I go to the left that many units. The second coordinate tells me that if it's positive, it tells me I go up that many units. And if it's negative, it tells me I go down that many units. But as I said, kind of over here, there may be a relationship between them. So let's kind of emphasize that. This is important. So what I want to say is that star, or actually even I've seen people, they attention, okay, so that this is kind of important to indicate this, is that by drawing, right, so when I took this point from over here, so I took this point pi 1, so let's go ahead and do that, so I have the point pi 1. Okay, so by drawing this, I actually could be indicating a relationship between them. Right, and the relationship that we kind of like is that if, and you'll see this with functions, right, is that if, so x is my first coordinate, so if I have x equals pi, then y equals 1. Okay. And as I said, this will be relevant, right? So this now is kind of this relationship that if my x value is pi, my y value is going to be 1. That's what it meant. Like if my input was pi, my output would be 1. So this will be relevant when we talk about graphs of functions. Okay, so important for graphs of functions. Okay. So this is just, we denote it R2 because it's 2 copies of R, which is the real numbers. And when I put the 2 lines there, I mean, I'm talking about the real numbers. First coordinate is my x coordinate. Second coordinate is my y coordinate. First coordinate tells me if it's positive, it tells me how far right I go. If it's negative, it tells me how far left I go. Second coordinate, if it's positive, it tells me how far up I go. If it's negative, it tells me how far down I go. And then usually when we look at this, there's this relationship, which should start getting used to, because this is one of the things that I found a lot of students kind of are missing, is this understanding of what we mean when we're drawing the graph of a function. That a lot of times we use this where the first coordinate's the input, the second coordinate's the output. So it's good to start getting that like entrenched in your mind, because you're going to want to use that a lot and it's going to be really useful for you. Okay, so I hope that made some sense, and I'll see you in the next lecture.